and this one is especially devastating. So I don't know why I like those, but I do.
Welcome. Verite is a fan-based podcast about the mental health themes of Taylor Swift's music. It is not therapy, but it is fun. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Katie, and I am the co-host with Ashleigh. Today's song that we're covering is So Long London. Ashleigh, can you tell us about why you selected this song?
Yes, this song is really special to me because I really like all of Taylor's really sad songs. And this one is especially devastating. So I don't know why I like those, but I do. So partly because relationship health is really difficult and it is something that I think is really important to talk about. I really thought that that was something that shows up in this song in unique ways. So I thought that it would be an interesting conversation. Um, I think it's interesting to see what hope can do, and the risks we're willing to take when we are in love and we have hope and we want something for the future with that person, but maybe the current reality is really hard or isn't working the way we thought. Um, it also gave me some like compassion fatigue vibes with some of the lyrics
Ooh,
that we're going to
yeah.
talk about. So compassion fatigue is where somebody like has compassion for somebody and then like gets worn out, or sometimes therapists can experience it just because of our job. We just kind of get tired or like burned out from like giving in that way. Um, it's a little bit codependent in some lyrics. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so codependency is where you're kind of like enmeshed with one another and aren't able to really see like your individual self. And I think this song kind of represents maybe somebody who's trying to make up for somebody else's mental health concerns. And, that can be a common thing that can happen because you feel like you want to fix things for people. But ultimately that person has to help themselves. And so I thought that would be an interesting, you know, conversation for us to have.
Yeah.
And she also kind of, in some ways, I think normalizes what it's like to live with somebody and be in a relationship with somebody who is struggling. So I'm not diagnosing the other person in this song, but I do feel like she references a few things that makes it clear that it was at least a hard time. And so
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was, yeah, a lot of really good meat that we
Yeah.
could talk about here.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that without diagnosing, there are things that make it sound like it could be depression?
I think so. That's kind of the impression I'm getting.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an impression I am as well. But again, like Ashleigh said, not a diagnosis. That's not what we're here to do. But just naming that like that's what it sounds like,
Hmm.
or there are things that are similar.
Yep. Yeah. And there are some lyrics that we'll talk about that kind of allude to that. Um, so should I dive into kind of the song summary?
Yes, so for our listeners, we're going to give you an overview of this song and what it's about. And then Ashleigh's going to highlight just like what the music itself seems to be communicating, like through the instruments and through like the vocalizations. Then she'll share some specific lyrics that she'll be discussing, and then I'll share a set of lyrics that I'm going to be discussing as we go through our questions and answer responses. So take us away.
Okay. Yeah. So I want to shout out Sam K8005 from YouTube, who commented that this might be kind of helpful because not everybody knows her music as much as maybe Katie and I are familiar with it. So thank you, Sam K8005, for that recommendation. Hopefully this is helpful. So Long London is this track 5? It is
It
track
is
5.
track 5.
Should
It is
Do we
track
need a
5.
quick moment for track 5?
Oh, we absolutely should do a quick moment for track 5.
So this is a little bit of Swiftie lore for anybody who's maybe not familiar. Typically on Taylor's albums, track 5 is the most heart-wrenching song. So I think it was happenstance in the beginning, but then like maybe by Fearless she caught on and intentionally puts the like most heartfelt or most intense song on track 5 for the rest of her albums. So this is very intentional, and I think it's interesting to look at other songs like "The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived,"
Hmm.
LOML or LOML,
Hmm.
that maybe didn't make track 5. So I think just this song being on track 5 itself shows kind of what Taylor views this song as.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
I think that that sums it up really well. So if you like sad songs, I would encourage you to revisit all of her albums and listen to track 5, because it is a highly anticipated track on all of her albums. We as Swifties know whatever track 5 is going to be, it's going to be very emotional and
Yeah.
usually a sad emotion.
Yes. Yeah. So this song starts with vocals from Taylor that are layered and sound like wedding bells. And she has then this beat that starts after she kind of starts this like "So Long London" intro, that kind of sounds like a heart racing to me. Like it's very fast. And I think that probably tells a story in itself of, she was dreaming of wedding bells, she was dreaming of a future, and then
Hmm.
under an undercurrent of anxiety was within this relationship, and that beat continues throughout the whole song. Um,
Hmm.
so I
But the
go ahead.
Oh, I did not mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
The beginning does not have that beat,
Hmm.
and I'll just like add like if you want an idea of what those vocals sound like think like church choir, but
Yes.
like boy choirs, like Catholic church boy choirs, like that's like the pitch, that's the vocalization. It's very like ethereal, it's very beautiful, and it's just it sweeps you up, but there's not a hint of anxiety, and then it immediately goes into this fast-paced synth beat. So sorry, you basically said that, but I just like wanted to add that piece about it sounding church like to me.
Yes. No, I'm so glad you did. Yeah, it does. It sounds, yeah, exactly like you said, like angelic, like just, yeah. It's beautiful. If you haven't heard this song yet, I would recommend listening to it. But then this beat starts, and this song actually has a double meaning. So "So Long London," she talks about like I was with you for so long, comma, London. And then she also says "so long," like "goodbye, London." And so it kind of depends on the lyric which one of those she's meaning, but I love a double meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so some of the lyrics that really stood out to me outside of, every single lyric in this song, um, were one is like in the first, I think it's the first verse. "I stopped trying to make him laugh, stop trying to drill the safe." So this song is about somebody who is like, struggling, and kind of Taylor's experience with making this decision of like, what am I going to do in this relationship. So stop trying to make him laugh, stop trying to drill the safe. I thought that was really powerful, like just cannot get that connection she's looking for. um in verse 2, she says, "I stopped CPR, after all it's no use," which reminds me of "You're Losing Me," which is a song that she released in between Midnights and TTPD. But she counts it as like part of Midnights Extended. And in that song, there's like a heartbeat. And so she also like talks about like resuscitating a relationship or trying to. And so I think she's referencing that when she says, "I stopped CPR." Even just talking about these lyrics, just like, oh,
It makes you so sad.
I
I'm right
know.
there with you.
Um, Another lyric that stood out to me was from the bridge, which Taylor's bridge in every song is killer. But the end of the bridge, she says, "Every breath feels like rarest air when you're not sure if he wants to be there." And I just, like, you can hear the devastation in that. Like, she wants this so badly. Um, And so when there's just like slightest bit of hope, it feels like fresh air.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah. Like
last
she can
one,
actually breathe.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just adding to what you were saying, like it feels like she can finally breathe. Like
Hmm.
air is rare. What is a very common resource is uncommon.
Hmm. Yeah, and is needed for life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, how likely do you think it is that we're going to get through this podcast without one of us crying?
So unlikely. Odds are low. Maybe our listeners can just place like a bet with yourself right now on who is going to cry first, Katie or Ashleigh. Oh, have fun with that, listeners. Today's
Um,
December 8th. It's the last day of the air store. We are very emotional.
yeah, this is rough. Um, the last lyric I had, this one is special to me. It like feels personal to me because it reminds me of times that I have been burned out in the past. And so the lyric is, and I'm just getting color back into my face. Um, and I just feel like when I hear that lyric, I remember those times for me of like just feeling like I've given everything I have, and then that recovery period can take so long. And
Mm-hmm.
so I picture like Taylor feeling gray, or like just being like
Mm-hmm.
I'm finally getting to the point where I can breathe and I can get color in my face and be healthy again. But it's
Yes.
taking a long time and I'm just getting there.
Yes. And another clever link to the song You're Losing Me, because she talks about her face being gray. And how can you say that you love someone when like I'm biting my nails down to the quick and my face is gray and you say that we're fine?
I did not remember that, Katie. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Her like inception mind with how she blends songs is truly remarkable, and it makes it fun. So for our listeners, like if you haven't, I hope that maybe we're inspiring you to like kind of explore like the musical journey that she brings you on when she just retells the same story but from so many different perspectives and layers. It's really quite fun to
Hmm.
track along with that.
Yeah, she makes a lot of like references in different songs about different things. It's super
Yeah.
cool. So, I mean, all of these lyrics are really good. The whole song is really good, but I would recommend listening to it. But those were the main lyrics that I wanted to dive into as a therapist with my therapist hat on.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Katie? What did you notice about this song, or what lyrics stood out to you?
Yeah. She opens the song with the phrase, I saw it in my mind, fairy lights to the myth. And I want to focus on that phrase, I saw in my mind. Uh, I'd like to talk through the phrase, two graves, one gun. Uh, I think that's a really fascinating story where she just talks about like what is presumably the relationship ending, and like there was one shooter, there was one weapon, there was one thing that ended it, but like both, there were two graves. So I think there's an imagery and story there. There's a phrase that says, you sacrificed us to the gods of your bluest days. And again, as somebody who's followed Taylor's music, the color blue is quite significant when she talks about this person, because this person, presumably who the song is about, the color blue gets brought up quite a bit in context of this person. So it's just interesting that she's again kind of using a double entendre there, where blue is like a beautiful thing, and then blue is also a sad thing here. And this idea that like somebody is sacrificing, like they're not going to fight for this relationship, like this is the collateral essentially of somebody's bluest days, of their saddest moments. And this is again that phrase that makes us curious if this is not depression, but again without diagnosing, just some curiosity. Another lyric is, my white knuckled dying grip, holding tight to your quiet resentment. Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. uh, and in this song, we see kind of a theme of being in a relationship with somebody where she's questioning if she wants to be there. She's questioning um, whether or not this person wants to stay in the relationship with her. And then she's also talking about like her desire to stay, kind of like what you've mentioned, Ashleigh, and we hear that in My White Knuckle Dying Grip, holding tight. And then we also hear it when she talks about, like you say, I abandoned the ship, but I was going down with it. And then a moment in the song that, for me, very much like feels like one of the most emotional parts is there is a lyric where she says, "And I'm pissed off you let me give you all that youth for free for so long, comma London."
Oh,
That phrase, if you listen to the song, you'll hear her emotion, and there's this fray in her voice that just like she's just so like you can hear the anger, you can hear the loss and the grief in her voice. And you hear it a little bit in another lyric that says, "I'm just mad as hell because I loved this place for so long, London." And so like she's professing like just how hard this was for her to leave and how good it was at one point before it was not good anymore. So I hope listeners we've convinced you to listen to the song again. If you're a fan, listen to it again. If you've never heard it before, to go look it up right now because it is a phenomenal song.
yeah, and maybe even You're Losing Me before.
Yeah, yeah.
I I mean, be prepared, informed consent. Like
Yeah. Informed consent. Yes.
you might cry, and that's okay if you cry. These are two very heartfelt, sad songs. And so, but I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think there's enough overlap to get the big picture.
Yeah.
But this song on its
And
own is so good too.
and if I can add, if you really want to hurt your feelings, listen to the song London Boy on Lover, then listen to You're Losing Me as the bonus addition to Midnight, and then listen to So Long London. Because those three songs, well, that would be a mashup. That would be a mashup if she did that.
What? Oh man, can you imagine if she did that live?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And for context, London Boy is about her love for somebody who is from London.
Hmm. Yeah.
So let's get
So
into it, Ashleigh.
let's do it. Yeah. I had really only a couple of questions. What did you think this relationship was going to be? Like what did that hope represent? Was it marriage? Was it just long-term love? Was it something else? Um, how did you know it was time to leave?
Oh, what a question.
Because this song is talking about that tension of like the white knuckle dying grip, like you said, like I'm trying so hard, but eventually she came to the conclusion that like nothing I do is going to make this work. So I want to know, what it was that caused her to be like, okay, this is my line. um
Mm-hmm.
and then how have you chosen to recover? How are you getting that color back into your face?
Ooh, I love that you frame that as a choice.
Oh, thank you.
That's a really, I thought that was really insightful that you just named that like recovery is a choice.
Well,
It's
yeah,
intentional.
I think I think it is. And I feel like we have to give so many caveats with things, right? Like
We
recovery
do.
is a choice, resilience can be a choice, right? At the same time, like feel your feelings and it's okay if you're
Mm-hmm.
not ready yet, like,
Oh yeah.
but I want to know for this person, like this is kind of a reflective song. So, you're still in recovery. Like what does that look like for you? And why are you, yeah, choosing to do that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, phenomenal. Yeah. No notes.
Thank you. What questions did you have, Katie?
You say I saw in my mind. So that makes me wonder with this client, the song, that, what kind of future were you imagining? Like, what was the timeline, or where in the timeline of your relationship would your mind go? And what kind of future did you hope for? And the reason I asked that question is one of my favorite kind of quotes that I've heard in my life is that your life is shaped by how you respond to your desires and your disappointments. And to say I saw in my mind speaks to me of desire and of hope for the future, which is one of the most vulnerable emotions I think that any human could possibly experience is to hold hope, because to hope for something means that you're fully alive and like vulnerable to the pain of that loss if it doesn't happen, or if it happens and it breaks, or what have you. And so that is a very vulnerable space. And so I would just want to explore the desires um, that she saw in her mind.
That is a really powerful phrase. Can you say that again?
Mm-hmm. Our lives are shaped by how we respond to our desires and our disappointments.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good.
It did not originate with me. Credit to whoever said it first. I'm pretty sure it was Dr. Allender that said that, but it's he may have gotten it from somewhere else. I don't know, but that's who I heard it from, and I have really loved that phrase. I also would want to explore the imagery of two graves, one gun. I thought that was really interesting because whose gun was it? Who or what was it loaded with?
Ooh, yeah.
What was it like? Was the metaphorical bullet a situation outside of your control? Was it something someone said or did, or maybe didn't do or didn't say? I, if any client of mine knows, I love a good metaphor. And so I just want to really explore like this idea of a gun. And then the same question for the graves, like who dug the graves? I think it's interesting because it's two graves, not one. And if it's the death of the relationship, wouldn't that be one grave?
Oh, you catch on to that stuff so well. That is such a good point.
So it's killed two people, maybe two things. So if the client has died, like what was it that died? Like what was it that got buried? And can some things be resurrected, or should some things remain dead? And what would be those things that maybe should be resurrected, and what things should remain buried?
Yeah. Yeah. That phrase buried reminds me of another song that she has. It's one that we got a request for, but I can't remember what it is. Um, Should have let it stay buried. That's
Oh,
LML.
yeah, LOMML. Yeah.
Yep.
LOML. I'm just gonna say LOML to our listeners
Lamo.
because I can never say the letter, spell the letters, and like not mess it up. So it's LOML, and if that bothers you, I'm really sorry. LOML for life. Okay. Were there any other questions under this section that you would want to talk about, Ashleigh, or should we move on?
Mm, no, I think we can move on. I just want to sit in this song forever. But yeah, let's move forward.
Only when you're ready, Ashleigh.
Thank you, Katie. Oh, go at your co-host's pace, not your client's pace.
You got it. Can you lead us with the recommendation that you would provide?
Yeah. Can I actually start with validation first?
Oh, please. Yeah, let's do that.
I just feel like before we get to that, I just want to oh, there's always sacrifice in relationships, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there is always going to be something that you don't like, or you're gonna like compromise with something and it's not gonna be like your ideal, but you're doing this for that person. And so it can be hard when it's like, okay, maybe it starts small of like, I'm if we're thinking about like sacrifice this to the gods of your bluest days, like that depression vibes that we are
Mm-hmm.
getting from this song, let's assume that's what that is. Like if you're really not feeling up to going out today, I will respect that because I want you to be okay and I want you to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that's like one random Wednesday out of a week, and that person seems fine the rest of the time. But then, like, as time goes on, like,
Mhm.
depression's really setting in, and it's getting harder and harder to communicate, and, I'm just, like, making up this story in my mind of, like, how much sacrifice you must have had to do to get to the point where you're like, "Okay, I cannot give anything else."
Mhm.
Um, and that for some people, that doesn't take very long, right? Some people are like, "Okay, no, it's my way or the highway. I don't need this." That's not the story in this song. The story in this song is like, at least I'm getting the impression that this was a long time. This was a lot
Yeah.
of sacrifice.
Mhm.
And so, you know, when we sacrifice maybe even more than we want to, that can be really hurtful. Even if we had a choice, it doesn't always feel like you do.
Oh, yeah. Perceived choice versus actual choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, maybe it feels like, okay, to keep this relationship going for those fairy lights, for this hope that I'm holding on to, I can do one more day of this. I can do one more month of this. And
Mhm.
eventually we'll get there. Um,
Yeah.
and that, like, I'm curious, like, how long were you pushing through? I guess that's another question.
Mhm.
But that feeling of pushing through, that burnout that you can experience, that fatigue you can experience, like, that's very real, and that can affect other
Yeah.
areas of your life and your own mental health too.
Yes.
So that
Yeah.
is something I want to validate. Um,
Yes. I'm so glad you did. And can I like add an additional thought to that?
please do.
Um, there's you're speaking to like a negotiation between like how long do I stay, and on your own behalf, but for a lot of our listeners and for a lot of people, that negotiation might also involve dependents, like children, or people that you're providing long-term care for. And that may or may not be kids. That could just be somebody who needs long-term care. But uh, you're also trying to negotiate the impact on like maybe people that you're responsible for, which is not necessarily something that's like spoken about in the song, but I just want to highlight because I think, and like as a therapist, this is often something like when I'm talking with a client about something along what you're describing and there's a dependent involved, they're also asking that same question based on maybe people who don't have as much autonomy in the situation, but who are also deeply affected by it.
Mhm. So another thing I would validate is, like, this other person seems to not be putting in as much effort as the songwriter. Um, so I just wanna also normalize, like, that person's experience, which I wasn't expecting to do, but, like, sometimes, again, assuming that there's, like, some depressive episode going on, like,
Mm-hmm.
it can be really hard to even get out of bed, um,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the severity, and so, like, yeah, you're not gonna be able to put in the amount of effort that maybe it would take to
Yeah.
keep a long-term relationship going at that time in your life. Um, or like the amount of effort you have has to be good enough for a time. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
so on the other hand of that is like how long is that other person willing to wait for that to happen? And like is that something that they can,
Mm-hmm.
deal
Mm-hmm.
with because it's hard. Like that's traumatic sometimes for somebody to
Yeah.
completely shut out. Um,
Yeah.
so that was just another thought I had.
I think that's such a good question. And I think I appreciate you bringing up, the person who is in that depressive state. And I think like maybe for that person to be honest too about where they're at
Mhm.
and honest about their capacity, willingness, effort to put in towards their own recovery, or if that's not something they're interested in, but they're going to say it, but then they're not going to follow through. And I'm not in any way implying that that's what happened in the
Right.
story of this song. It's just a question I'm asking in general about situations like these. So I just want to be clear about that distinction.
Yeah, that we're not talking about Taylor and a specific person. We're talking about the art that Taylor has provided and what this makes us think as therapists.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you would validate about this song, Katie?
Yeah, this song speaks very tenderly to hope,
Mm-hmm.
to commitment, to profound grief, and the longevity of that grief. Because this is not like one sad thing. This is Death by a Thousand Cuts, which is also a really great song by Taylor if you haven't heard this before. Um, I like to imagine that grief is an unwelcome house guest that moves in and then stays until she's ready to leave. And sometimes grief is like an unwelcome family member, right? That moves into your home and like doesn't actually ever move. Um, and she's there to remind you of the love that you had and lost. And so I just believe very deeply that grief is a testament to love. The depth of the grief reveals the depth of the love that was there. Um, so that's what I would really validate in the song of like, it's a sad song, but it's a sad song because there was so much love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't get this sad about something you don't care about.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Should we move on to recommendations?
Yeah, this is so sad.
Are you crying?
Uh,
Are you the first to cry?
I'm not
Is it
crying,
happening?
but there are tears, okay? I'm not
I'm
crying.
not crying, but there are tears. I get you. I get you.
They're just like they're right there, but they have not
Right there.
fallen yet.
Understood.
Um, so recommendation wise, um, I would want to do some sort of like burnout recovery plan.
Ooh, excellent direction. Yeah.
I say that super confidently as if I would have some sort of template for that. I don't. I think it would be a lot of I think it would be a lot of questions of like what feels life-giving to you? How much, where are we from like last week to this week? What have you noticed? Have you noticed any joy? Have you noticed any energy? Like I think with
Mhm.
burnout, and you can be burnt out on a ton of different things, but like when your body is to the point of like, I can't do this anymore, like you have to give it time to recover. So, um, like time away from whatever you might need. And it sounds like a breakup was like that for this song. And then how do you like make sense of the aftermath of that, right? Like I feel like there's a lot
Mhm.
of acknowledging what happened, acknowledging the truth, how you played a part, how the other person played a part, naming
Yeah,
that stuff, and then being able to be like, okay, now that I've named it, which is what therapists love,
we do.
then we can start moving forward and like, okay, I know what I'm looking for. I know what went wrong. Kind of like a review of like, this is what happened, and now I have time, and I feel like my body is recovering, so now I can move
Mhm.
forward. Um, and then I would also ask, like, what do you wanna remember for future relationships? Like, is this
Mhm.
something that oh, your face made me think something different, though. Were you thinking I meant nostalgically?
Actually, no. Like, I was thinking in terms of like, what is something that you want to take with you from this relationship, like in a positive way? Like, even in the most painful of circumstances, there are takeaways.
Mhm.
And what are those takeaways? So that is that what you were thinking, or is it slightly different?
It is, but I also, like I think there is some okay, this is going rogue a little bit, but like there's something to honoring a relationship or something that you're ending, even like a job or, an
Mhm.
experience that you're having that you're ending, um, and honoring that in some way, even if the other person isn't necessarily involved. So like, do you need to sit in the parking lot of your college when you're moving out and just reflect? Or do you need to sit in the office that you've spent years in and, be thankful for the
Mhm.
memories. Does this song need to sit in London and say, London, thank you, and so long, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that you're naming there is an element of closure that does not have to involve or require involvement from the other, the other person, the other situation. Like it doesn't, it can just be by you, for you. And I love to hear this. Thank you for bringing that up.
It was your facial expression that made me think it. So thank you for your face.
Oh, you're so welcome. I have been told that my face tells a lot of stories because I don't hide my emotions well. If I'm thinking it, you're probably reading it on the face.
I love it. Um, yeah, okay. I think that's all the recommendations that I had. I know I went rogue a little bit. So what recommendations did you have down, Katie?
I love when you go rogue. I so I'll just read a lyric, which is "You sacrificed us to the gods of your bluest days." I think this says a lot, and you touched on this some, so I won't spend a lot of time on this point. But I think that there's space for differentiation between staying around for someone's mental health and staying for the relationship or staying for yourself.
Yes.
And those are different. And that's a very hot topic and it's a very nuanced one. And so I'm not going to try and speak to specifics whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But there can be multiple motives and they can coexist at the same time. And there are altruistic motives and there are selfish motives and there are fear-based motives and they can all be there simultaneously. And so I think that it's possible to be in a relationship, let's say in the context of the song, with somebody who is very much suffering in their mental health and wanting to stay for that and for them. There might also be a part of you that there's the hope. And then it also could be like, I'm really afraid to leave. And there's some fear motivation. Maybe there's a selfishness. Maybe there's something about this person or this relationship, this job, this experience, whatever, that meets some kind of need that you're like, I just need more of this in some way. Maybe the need to be needed, or maybe the need to be admired, or maybe the need to be the expert, or I don't know what that could be. But humans are complex. There's rarely ever only one story because there's rarely ever one part at play. So that would be one recommendation to explore that. And then I would also like to say that someone's mental health, in my opinion, is an individual and a collective responsibility. So, what I mean by that is we are responsible for our own choices. We are responsible to tending to our own healing and recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my belief, as of today, that people heal best in healthy community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we have a responsibility to care and love for people in a way that supports their thriving through our words, through our actions, through our votes, through our money. That being said, there's a balance and a tension between the two. If you're someone who's staying in a relationship due to your partner's mental health, I would really encourage you, if that's the situation of the listener, to seek out trusted guidance, maybe even therapy if you are able to help you navigate the specific situation, because there's a lot of pieces at play there. So those are kind of my two recommendations.
Yeah, I think that was a really good thing to bring up, Katie, the collective community aspect of like not just turning your back on somebody who's struggling, but also not fixing it for them
Mm-hmm.
because you
Yeah,
can't fix it.
right.
We're
And you
therapists,
also
we can't
can't.
fix it.
No, no. And to kind of shrug your shoulders and say, oh well, it's all up to them, while ignoring these bigger collective pieces that affect somebody, is also irresponsible. And I think that in American culture we tend to be so individualistic that there's a comfort in just saying, well, that's on you, without taking into account of like how I exist impacts how you exist, and the choices I do and don't make influence you. And so while I think that's true in a collective sense of relationships and a community, that can also be true in a collective sense nationally or within your state or within your city, right? In a bigger sense. So kind of taking this from the micro to macro level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good. And doing so with boundaries, right? Like not bending
Yeah.
over backwards, not getting burned out yourself. But being there to support. That connection
Mm-hmm.
can sometimes be the I can't think of the word. the stepping stone of somebody like being able to take the steps that they need to themselves. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm really glad you brought that up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Shall we move on to
And in
challenges?
regards, yeah, I was just going to say, in regards to challenge, would you like to start us out again?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. I had one. And that challenge is, what would he say happened?
Oh, oh, wow. Spicy Ashleigh. Bring, like, that is such a challenge. That is such a challenge. That's a great challenge. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, I know. I feel like it is a risk. Like the rapport in therapy would need to be there for that question. But I also think it's important, just like what you were just saying, like as a community, you are kind of like interacting with somebody and that we're going to affect each other. And so, this is a one-sided song, as all songs are, as all people's stories are. Um,
Hmm.
but if we reflect, like, okay, if I had said this different, or if I had said anything at all, I wonder if something would change. And you know, we don't know his reasoning for having blues. We don't know his reasoning for saying that she's leaving too soon. We
Hmm.
don't have his perspective. And I know some people like will write response songs from the other person's perspective on YouTube and stuff, which I think is super fun and cool, but we don't know the truth, right? So,
Yeah.
um, we, I think it would be interesting to, with anybody, right? Like sometimes therapists will ask for somebody else's perspective. Like, could you write, a summary of your experience with my client so that I can, understand how they're coming off to you? Or like
Hmm.
we'll do joint
Hmm.
sessions sometimes, or with couples, we get both perspectives. And so sometimes that can be helpful. And so I think this would be a reflective question for this client, because right now, and this would be like later on in a therapy journey, right? This is not day one. But right now we're in the middle of our feelings, and we're like thinking about how all of the external factors impacted us. What would the other person say, and what could we learn from that perspective?
Hmm. Yes. Yes. That is such a good point and such a difficult one. And I second you on the rapport piece because uh, I think that in situations where we feel like we might be in that compassion fatigue, we've given and given and given this endless empathy. And it feels like there's already been a lot of perspective taking. And then to do that again, but perspective taking in terms of challenge, right? Like challenging yourself to listen to somebody's perspective, even if you don't agree with it, even if it hurts you, to take on that perspective. And I always kind of invite my clients to sift through feedback and sift through various perspectives with this idea of take some and leave some. What's something that, as painful as this is, to walk away and say, this is actually something I need to work on within myself? And then what are things that I need to leave behind? Like maybe an accusation was made, or maybe there was some shame, or maybe there was whatever. And that I need to leave behind, but this I need to take, even if it was maybe spoken harshly, but there's still value in what was said, even if I need to leave the harshness behind.
Yeah. Which reminds me of what you said in a previous episode of gifting someone with feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a really good point too, that like it should be given kindly if you're giving feedback, but it is like if somebody's saying something, they're saying it for a
Mm-hmm.
reason. And you don't have to
Yes.
accept everything that somebody says, but it is good to
Mm-hmm.
reflect.
And I'll add to that. Like there have been times where I have been given feedback and it wasn't given gently. It was given harshly. And that's where I had to do some sifting between like even if this person I think was in the wrong for how they communicated what they did, and I don't necessarily think they had my best interest at heart, they actually did make a valid point about my behavior. And then I had to be like, okay, that is worth changing, even if I'm not going to accept maybe their critical spirit, maybe I'm not going to accept their harshness. And that differentiation takes time, but is a really important work to do because we're not always gifted with gentle feedback. Oftentimes, I would say that's maybe not the case. And you
Yeah.
still have a responsibility to take it
Mm, yeah. Yeah. When it's appropriate.
when appropriate. Yes, that's an excellent disclaimer. When appropriate.
I think you said that too, but I am just over correcting here. So,
I love it. It's worth saying because it's an important point. Yeah. Any other challenges?
that was all I had. How about you?
Hey, I would invite the song/client to consider how much she has left in order to be in a relationship. So, specifically in the context of partnered relationships, we have to consider and explore how much of ourselves we might be negotiating away in order to stay for the sake of the relationship. So, for example, how much do I have to emotionally mask in order to stay in this relationship? How much of myself do I have to keep away from you in order to be tolerated or in order to be accepted or loved by you? And you're making a lot of interesting faces right now. Can you tell me what you're thinking, Ashleigh?
So they were mostly Swiftie faces. You talked about emotional masking, so it reminded me of I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, which we also have an episode
Absolutely.
on. And then you said tolerate, which reminded me of Tolerate It. And maybe it's just because we
Mm-hmm.
talked about the Eras tour, but I was just, yeah, thinking of like all of these other songs that like could be, I mean, if we were to make a playlist of like all of the
Mm-hmm.
things that are connected to this, I think it would be a long playlist. So that's what I was thinking.
Agreed. Yeah. And then another thing I might challenge is the lyric, my white knuckle dying grip, holding tight to your quiet resentment. Whoa. What is happening here? Holding tight to quiet resentment. I think that is a very interesting phrase because it seems to be revealing or hinting that not only is this person receiving the resentment, like they're holding on to it. And so this like grip, this idea that like the person, like the song client, it is clinging to resentment. What makes you hold on to this person's resentment of you? I think that's a really fascinating thing to explore, where maybe a listener or you and I as people might explore what are things that we're holding on to that like I could let go of that. That speaks to choice. So let's explore that choice. Let's challenge that idea that I'm clinging to something that another person is giving me that is harmful and unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it reminds me too of attachment styles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So quiet resentment makes me think like avoidant attachment style, which means, very like dumbed down summary of that is like somebody who's not really interested in sharing their feelings or engaging with them. Um, and there's a lot that we could say about that, but that's where I'm going to leave it for the purpose of this episode. And
Sure.
then, holding tight to it reminds me of anxious attachment, which is like, no, please, like, I need what you can give me. Like, if this is all you can give me, I'll hold on to it. Right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's, there's so much that we could dive into
Mm-hmm.
with this song. We could probably talk about 3 hours about it, but
Yeah. For a long time. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just add one final note, which is one of the definitions that I've heard for resentment that I think seems to fit uh, is that resentment is unexpressed anger.
Mm, mhm,
And uh, the quietness, right? It's maybe covert, but it's present and they know it and you know it and you're holding on to it. So, like, there's just something about like I think you nailed it with the attachment styles. But yeah, I think there's a lot there to kind of challenge and explore
mhm.
maybe what to let go of there. So
Yeah.
excellent thoughts. I think thank you for your feedback and for your thoughts there.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving into encouragement. What would you encourage, Ashleigh?
I I'm laughing because the tears are coming up just thinking about it.
Oh, if you
Um,
voted on Ashleigh, you just won.
um, you can even see it, my eyes.
Oh, it's so sweet.
I think there's two things that come to mind. One is the fairy lights, the first line that she says, I saw fairy lights in the mist. I'm gonna read it. I can't think of it right now because I'm all
Mhm.
emotional. I saw in my mind fairy lights through the mist. Um, that those fairy lights can still exist even if they're not in the way that you thought they would be. And the other one is that eventually, do you need a moment?
Keep going. Just keep going. You're getting me up in my feels.
Um, the other one is eventually your full color will come back.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if we look at Taylor, um, yeah, okay, before I get there, that line I saw in my mind fairy lights through the mist, like the mist being like whatever that bullet is that you talked about, right? Like the
Hmm.
mist being this heaviness of depression or, the difficulty in this relationship and just not know, like you see it, but you can't tell where they are or if they're coming and they're coming. Like your
Hmm.
life will get better.
Hmm.
Um, and then with Taylor, she uses color a lot. Like she
Yeah.
has that album Red. She has
Hmm.
I mean this album TTPD is like primarily black and white. We talked about that in the Fortnite music video too. That
Hmm.
it's all black
No
and white
color.
except for what their messages are in the typewriters. And then in Out of the Wood, right?
Hmm.
Out of the Woods. Um she says
Yeah. So
we were in screaming color. Are we out of the woods yet?
I feel like it's maybe a different song, but I can't pull it off my head right now.
It's worth a Google.
Google away.
Out of the woods. The rest of the world was black and white, but we were in screaming color.
Oh, it is Out of the Woods. You were
Hmm.
right.
That's from her
Okay.
1989 album. She does a lot of work with color. And like you said,
Yeah.
with You're Losing Me, like she talks about being gray in the face. And so just like the beauty of recovering from whatever hardship you're experiencing. And like she talks
Hmm.
about the slowness, like I'm just getting color back into my face. Like you have no idea the steps I've taken to get to this point.
Hmm.
And so to encourage this person, like very resilient, like
Hmm.
definitely committed to the people that you're connected with, right? Have a lot of
Yeah.
passion for what you believe your future could hold. Um,
Yeah.
and eventually life will have screaming color again.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's honestly something that so many people, when they describe like depression or grief or being low, is that like I just don't see a lot of color. But then like it's like life comes into full bloom and we do see color and we do see life when we feel more connected to ourselves and to the world and to other people. That is such a beautiful encouragement. I love it.
What would you encourage?
Mm. Something that I think Taylor does exceptionally well, and how she not only does this for herself, but I think she models this, is allowing grief to come and do her work inside of us. Because grief will do work in us if we allow it. Because grief will come whether or not we cooperate, whether or not we permit. It's just there. And it's so much, I think, more, I think it's smoother for us. I think that it's a richer experience, not pain-free but richer experience for us to embrace when grief shows up, to listen, to spend time with her, but also to know that we can spend time and then leave. It's like visiting. You can visit and you stay for long visits or short visits, but you don't live there forever because it's too much to live there in that space. And I would encourage anger to be part of that. In fact, I think grief requires there to be some level of anger. And we hear that, like, I'm pissed off, you let me give you all that use for free. And again, when she says, I'm mad as hell because I loved this place for so long, London. And I would say embrace and embody that. And when I use the word embody, I think what I'm trying to communicate there is allow your body permission to feel and metabolize the grief. And if those words confuse you, I'd encourage you to look up somatic therapy and what that entails. So I'll let you do that Google search, but that will kind of give you a little bit of a better understanding of what I mean by that word.
Mhm. Such good thoughts, Katie. I feel like, my hope for this is that if somebody is in a similar position, is feeling
Mm-hmm.
like, there isn't hope, there isn't going to be like the fairy lights that I've been looking for aren't going to be there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I hope that that person feels seen and
Yeah.
gets, you know, the support that they need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's okay for you to just know that fairy lights are there and not feel it because feelings
Yes.
follow. And so if somebody else needs to hold that for you, if somebody else needs to cast that vision, or if that just needs to be like more mental than emotional, like that's okay because our emotions follow over time. And so it might take some time to get there. And that time might be way longer than what you're comfortable with. And that's all part of the process. You're not doing it wrong. Nothing's broken. It's just the process.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to say?
That sums it up. Thank you so much, Ashleigh. Would you like to wrap us out today or wrap us up? Up and out today?
Absolutely. And thank you, Katie, too. This was a really fun, good, cathartic conversation to have.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks everybody for listening. If you want to find us on Instagram, our handle is Therate Podcast. If you want to listen to a playlist, we have a playlist of all of the songs that we've done through TTPD on Spotify. Listen to So Long London too. And if you want to request a song, we've had a couple of requests come in, and we're excited to cover those too. So feel free to do that. Our email is theratepodcast@gmail.com. We want to shout out Jeremy for editing this podcast. Thank you, Jeremy. You're doing a great job. And I also want to say, Katie, this is the last song from TTPD that you and I originally chose.
It
So
is.
anything from here is going to be requests, or keep an eye on our social media to find out what's next.
Yeah. I did not know what to say to that.
That's fair. I just want to, throw it out there that maybe there's some things you should keep an eye on. So, but yeah, I hope you guys have a great day and thanks for listening. Talk to you later.